Okay, so Linnea's going to be running our meeting tonight. Gary is recovering from some medical treatments. He's doing okay, and we're hoping for the best for him. But yeah, he's not going to be here, and so in the meantime, Linnea will be kind of handling that. And we also know that Lilani will not be joining us tonight, but I have not heard from Tom Sparks, so I'm not quite sure if he'll be making it or not.
Okay. Is everyone accounted for?
That is everybody accounted for.
Okay, so I don't think we need to do an introduction, but the agenda review. Has everyone looked at tonight's?
I think we should.
I did. Oh, do we need to do introductions?
I think we should. Because we have, I guess.
Oh, good point.
Do you want me to start?
Go for it.
Kathy Peterson, where do I go?
Wherever you want.
Kathy Peterson.
You don't have to look at the TV. It's just, you're not gonna see our self-view. We're just sitting around the table. That's just for folks that are tuning in.
Up there.
Camera is up
Okay,
there.
so the camera's hooked
Okay.
up, the green light.
Kathy Peterson from the southeast corner.
Rusty Weaver from the northwest corner.
Linnea Madison from Lake Park Drive.
Dave Congeezer, Water Resources Specialist, City of Tumwater.
Dan Smith, Water Resources and Sustainability Director.
Dana Day, Lark Street.
Judith Loft, Lake Park Drive.
Doug Dorling, Bush Mountain Quadrant. No, we're the applicator for the Barnes Lake District. We're the consultant.
Okay, has everyone looked at the agenda?
I didn't have a chance to look at it.
Just as a reminder too, with all hybrid meetings, they are recorded. So for your own awareness, for folks at home and for folks around the table.
Thank you.
Did I say something wrong?
No, I'm just, no, introduce yourself. Introduce yourself, you're fine. I just want to make sure that.
Please, I
you're
said I
right.
didn't read the agenda. I didn't have time.
Is there a copy of the agenda that we could?
Right.
Of course, yes.
Anything to add or anything to modify? If no, then we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
I read the meeting minutes and I don't have any recommendations, so I know that they be accepted as written.
Second.
Rusty, was that a second or?
That's approved. Do we vote on it?
Yes, so there's a motion, there was a second to the motion, and then now you just need an approval. All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed?
Next up is public comment.
I don't believe, I think we have Lori Lynn Lario. Do you have any comment for the committee tonight?
No, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. And then member comments, so anybody around the table, any on the committee?
The lake is looking lovely.
It is.
It really
It's at
is.
its best at this time, I think.
Yeah.
And
Lots of
this,
open water.
and a lot of geese. Is this unusual to geese at this time?
Really, is it unusual?
I think,
They like your yard.
Yeah.
We don't allow them in ours.
I just think it's nice that when it looks beautiful, we recognize that.
Yeah.
yeah, there's plenty of water and
And
the
those
geese are flying
floating
around.
islands are all brown.
Merged, yeah. They're all,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, they're all wet.
They're at
Well,
their least.
They're not green, let's put it that
Yeah.
way. They're still there.
It looks like somebody cut them down.
Anybody seen the flock of mergansers that come in every once in a while? They'll do the black and white. God, stunning. Right up in our little corner up there.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, they show up there and then I don't know where they go.
And we did blip the Barnes Lake Illuminated Parade on New Year's Eve.
Happy birthday.
It was a smashing success. No one fell in. We lost my mom for a little while, but we found her.
Oh, gosh.
So my plan next year is to do Blip again and be more organized about it and get the word out in advance. So that is my commitment to
Yay.
Blip
Yeah.
next year.
Maybe it'll become like those Southern California, canal neighborhoods now that have unbelievable schooners with lights on.
Oh,
Just-
we kind of have
No, I know,
low
I saw-
expectations.
I saw that.
That's how I like it.
We pride ourselves on our minimalism.
Yes, yes.
What was the weather like?
It was just
It
fine.
was.
It was absolutely fine. Yeah. Yeah.
For this part of the world.
Yeah,
It wasn't raining.
it wasn't raining. Okay, next up is the newsletter article ideas and assignments. that I think we talked about at the last meeting.
I thought Gary was working.
Is that the
If you
agenda
ever
up there
recall-
still?
Yeah. Oh, no, those are the minutes on there still.
I got, yeah, I was gonna.
I believe we had a number of different articles
Here we
that we
go.
were talking about. And folks were just raising their hands around the table, getting them done. I'll create a basic, budget update, kind of a conversation around kind of the work plan and some of the administrative bits and pieces. But I think the committee was going to come together with some of the kind of the more neighbor to neighbor friendly type conversations about stuff and successes we've had in the lake. So I don't have the particular topics. I don't know if we caught it in the minutes.
We didn't in this. I've got a template somewhere that I went over with communications department. And I think, Dan's got a couple of bits and pieces that he can add. I got a couple of bits and pieces I can add from a water quality perspective and wildlife and whatnot. But I think there's gonna be probably 2 slots for a little article from somebody. Doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be too in-depth on anything. So
On what sort of thing?
what topic du jour? I mean, whatever,
But obviously regarding the lake.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
Politics.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this goes out.
Or maybe
No,
politics on the
Keeping
lake.
it focused on Barnes Lake, not necessarily.
I
Yeah.
thought 2.5 geese flying
Yeah.
No.
You could do the
So
daily.
this goes out to the Barnes Lake property owners,
Yeah.
the LMD.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe something like, talk about the floating mats. I mean, people see them and
About how many words do you
maybe
think is?
200, 250, 300, somewhere in there.
I'll do it.
Maybe talk about something like that somebody might not know the intricate details that we might know, just to kind of get some.
Is there a deadline?
If you want us to go out and kind of coordinate with the assessments, about a month. I can hold them off until about April. But so.
Rossi, should we have a little get together talking?
If you want, or I can just do it and send you what I
Okay, all
drive,
right.
just general about the lake,
Maybe your own personal experience with the lake, how it's improved over the years, the benefits that you see of having a committee manage the lake, so some of those things from your perspective, how this process works, that kind of stuff, stuff that, your neighbors might be interested in.
Rusty, after you get that
Great
done, if you've
idea.
got extra room, I can write something about the importance of the wetlands on Barnes Lake.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's a good idea.
Okay.
Either that, or we can save that for another time, or do it this time, though.
You whatever, you guys do your thing, and if you got,
Because 200 words is nothing.
oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, anyway, it's amazing, the shoreline spraying that you did, that's amazing. You could define our neighbors who didn't do it. You can see the line, yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I feel secure.
I think that it would be nice to have some shortened version of the annual report. Like, I don't know how to kind of boil it down, make it into a bulletin cube. But
Okay. I mean,
about that we do have an annual report
okay,
and that there are recommendations and, that, especially now that people are more tied in because of the money and recognizing that you know, this is what our money goes for.
Yeah, the recognition really of achievement.
I mean, alternative, I'm sure Doug could put an executive summary together of the report, but like also maybe even a summarization of from the committee's perspective, how you view the report. Because we can include a link to the report itself, so that way, anybody can go in there and you can, I've seen newsletter articles, from folks where they've talked about, and recommendations are on page 6 or whatever, and we were really supportive of these, few items. So it's less from Doug's perspective as a vendor or contractor, doing the work on the lake, but more from the community's perspective of, the successes that, Doug's been working with this group since, its inception. And so it's like, what's your perspective of Doug's work, kind of summarizing, the next steps for that as well.
Yeah, it
It's a
just
different
seems to me
approach.
that people didn't always realize how professionally this lake management is done.
Yeah.
They just kind of think, oh yeah, we send this money and we may or may not see anybody working, on the lake.
Most people wouldn't notice.
Yeah,
They
that's
won't.
good, right?
But they will notice a good result.
Yeah.
Well, and
Right.
we're already working forward to the next 15, and making sure that, I guess it was a surprise to me how little people were aware of what goes on. It just, it's something they're used to paying, and it's not a whole lot of money. So, maybe we could work together
Sure.
on that, because what I don't like is, I like drafting stuff, but I don't like saying things that aren't true. So,
What, saying things that aren't true?
yes,
So,
yes, like leading the witness here.
Well, that occurrence you mentioned about a lot of people not realizing what's involved, that's pretty typical in most
Yeah.
associations. There's usually a hardcore group of people
Yeah.
that show up to all the meetings.
But if we
Very
have
few,
it as a handout, I've known of people to go back and look through the old stuff that's in the file. Because that rests there as something that.
No, that's fine.
Could I ask for a hard copy of Doug's report? Thank you.
So I've got an annual report summary from Kathy and Doug as a topic. Anything else?
And these two,
What
what were you gonna do? You and you?
topic?
Well, you're,
I'm just on the stress. Whatever.
Oh, like your perspective.
Yeah.
yeah, how much we enjoy.
And how much things have changed, I think would be a good.
Yeah.
Just your observations.
Hi, folks. It's Tom Sparks. Sorry to be late joining everybody.
Hey,
Hey there,
hi,
Tom.
Hi, Tom.
I don't.
We've talked often in the before and after pictures.
Mhm. I have some of them. Yeah.
That is always, it's actually a photograph is always a wow.
2007, when
There's
we
no
bought the
discussion.
property, You could not see the lake.
Yeah.
This
Couldn't see
Yeah.
water.
is covered.
Yeah.
It looks pretty.
We have pictures in the archives all over the place.
And it's good to remember how how as it was.
And the lilies affect fish, right? They suck oxygen out of the water, is that right?
The lilies,
Yeah,
oh, that's a long shot.
okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I
They
thought-
do at night, but they're really more effective fish more because of the cover they give them
Okay,
In a positive way.
in a positive way.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
You might be thinking of like the decomposition of organic
Well,
material, like
it's
rocks.
just that
water.
somebody was telling me that they live on another lake. And I said, oh, do you have lilies over there? And they said, oh, yeah, we got lilies. And I said, oh, well, how's the fishing? He said, well, it's not like what it used to be. So I just thought maybe.
Oh, yeah, because what happens is the lily pads provide protection. So what
For
happens,
the little ones.
so the little fish are never really eaten by the bigger fish. So it creates a problem.
They come over to our area where it's shallow. It's all little fish in there. The big ones don't. They hang out.
Moving
It's a
on
good
to
thing that
lake
they're protected.
management with Doug.
Okay, so we've got an update and a annual report. So from an update standpoint, I think this is gonna be a pretty critical year for Barnes Lake, at least from our standpoint. Because I'm having a little bit of issues with continued Floridone treatments on Barnes Lake. Simply because the timing of the material when we used it the last time wasn't right. Because of water level. And the Floridone has a tendency to impact the wetlands. It didn't impact it the first time we used it, but there's always a potential that the Floridone will impact the wetlands. And because of the fluctuation of the water on Barnes Lake, if the water level drops too fast, when the Floridone treatment is occurring, all those plants that get stuck on the islands are not impacted by the Floridone.
Oh,
And so what happens is in the winter, when the lake is full again, those plants float back all over the lake, which is why we had the problem we did this year. We didn't have a really good Floridone treatment back in the last time we did it. Because the second Floridone treatment was applied sooner than it should have been because of the water level. Lake levels dropped. We had a lot of the islands still had bladderwort on it. So when we came in 2022, those bladderwort plants became viable. And so that's why we need higher treatment for 2022. We really didn't anticipate it, but it was required, and so we did it. So that's one thing we got to really seriously look at for this year. I want to see how much of the bladderwort comes back from last year's semi dicot treatment. Because we work on a lake in Lake Susan, which is over in Tumwater. They had a bladderwort problem a few years ago, and we applied dicot to it, and the bladderwort basically was eliminated for 4 or 5 years. The only bladderwort that we've seen in that lake since then comes in from Munn Lake. So hopefully we're going to see that type of result on Barnes Lake this year.
How soon do you know whether things have been knocked down adequately?
Early in the season, I'm going to say by June.
no,
Middle of
really?
June. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Again, it depends on water temperature. But generally, you can start seeing the bladderwort come in June, middle of June. Probably by the time the first survey, we'll probably schedule the first survey a little later than we normally do. So we get that in the hole.
So is a workaround to apply the chemical earlier when the water level's higher?
Well, yeah, it does work better if the water level is higher. The problem is that if the weeds aren't there, the weeds haven't germinated.
Oh, yeah,
then
yeah, too early.
it's too early. It's
Yeah.
really, it's temperature, temperature related. And last year, when we started 2022, the water temperature of the lake was 67 degrees. The year prior to that, the same time frame, within 2 or 3 days, it was 70 degrees.
it's warm this year, right? I think
70 degrees is pretty warm for the
stuff's been pretty warm.
early part of June. So that was one of the issues we saw. But anyway, so for the report, well, I'll just go through it fairly quickly. We surveyed the lake on June 11th. And we try and survey dates similar to the dates we surveyed in the past. So we get a fairly good perspective of what we've got and what we don't have. So we're not surveying the lake on, early part of June one year and then the middle of July the next year. I mean, totally out of perspective. So, the early part of the season, I said the water temperature was probably 5 or 6 degrees warmer in 2022 than it was in years past. So on this is a picture of the surveys that we did in 2020 2 and 2021. So the one on the left, you can see, and they're all right around the same time. The green areas are areas that are about 40 to 50% covered with weeds. The red areas are 100% covered. So you can see there's a pretty big difference between 2021 and 2022. And so when we saw that 2022 map, we realized that there's going to need treatment last year on Orange Lake. Now, the other thing that's a little misconception here is the fact that some of that green area to the right is not are not weeds, it's algae that's going on the bottom. So that's a little bit of a misrepresentation there, but we'll cover that a little later. So, you know, we use the same survey technique that we've always have done for the last 10 years. It's all electronic. Drive around the lake, we get the readings off the bottom of the lake. And then it's processed. That's basically the transects, or where the boat has passed on the lake to take the picture or to recover the data. Obviously, there's some areas of the lake where we just don't have access.
I do like that all of the pictures are exactly the same orientation. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Doug, is that the depth? Are those depth?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are depths.
Okay.
Feet.
Those are depths.
It's interesting to see where the deepest part of the lake is.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to see.
So that just goes to the top of sediment, it doesn't penetrate down through soft sediments, right?
No, yeah, it's also the top of the, just the top of the sediment. But it's really soft, you get some penetration, but not that's going to affect the lake itself. And so that's what the next picture, that's Nitella. That was growing on the bottom of the lake.
What's it?
What is it?
It's an algae. It's called Nitella. I consider it the plant that's between the algae and plant kingdom. Because if you, I guarantee if I were to pick this up and show it to 99% of the people on the lake, they'd think it was a weed. But it's not a weed, it's an algae. And it only grows maybe a foot off the bottom. And it's a good weed because of the fact that it blocks out the sunlight. So bad weeds or non-native weeds won't grow. So it's a good one to have in the lake.
So it's a native.
Yeah, Nitella is native. So one of the things
Have
we,
nutritional value?
I was wondering now.
well, I don't know.
You start marketing.
Yeah.
There's not much nutrition in any of the weeds because they're like 98% water.
Huh.
So I mean, so you gotta, you know,
I know when you get stuff, you rake stuff out, I'll rake some stuff out and put it on
Oh,
our
it's-
dock there. And once it dries, there's nothing. It weighs almost nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we started to do is we've got some set data points on the lake now.
That's it.
And so when we survey in springtime, we go out to all those spots. We throw the rake over the side of the boat, we pull the rake up, and then we see what weeds are out there. And then we put them into the data set. And so the stuff down the bottom is the different species that were in those spots in 2021 and 2022. So we just go to the first one, it was 002. You see, in 2021, there were no plants at that location.
That's your house, right?
Yeah.
2022, we found bladderwort, Nitella, and pondweeds. So what this does is it'll eventually give us a pretty good representation of the yearly progression of the weeds on the lake.
What is C?
What's that?
What is the C?
C is Cara. Cara is another type of algae.
Beneficial? No.
Right. Well, let me see what I put it down there. No, it's coontail. C is a coontail. It's a plant that looks like milfoil. Looks like.
And we've had it for a long time. Right?
Yeah, coontail. So what we noticed during that survey are bladderwort, pondweeds, coontail, and Nitella.
Oh my gosh. So isn't that at Dana's house where you put in?
Excuse me?
Isn't that at Dana's house where you put in?
So one of the things we can do with the survey is we can go back, and we can process all the data we have, and we can determine the bio volume. In other words, how many plants are within the water column. And so we can see in 2021, we were looking at a little, maybe 12% of the water column was covered with plants. But then we go into 2022, it's up to 30%. So
But that includes that's the bottom of the lake.
includes
also.
the entire water column. From
Yeah.
the bottom of the lake up to the
Oh,
surface.
yeah.
So we're gonna get even a little bit more specific. We can tell you what the bio volume is on a per foot basis. Well, this is a per meter basis. So between 0 and 1 meter, 1 to 2 meters, 2 to 3 meters, 3 and 4 meters, and 4 or 5 meters. And again, you can see that 2022, the shallow depths out to around 3 meters were considerably dense with weeds. When we get out into the deeper water, it wasn't quite as bad.
What's going all the way on the far right? What's the depth of that one?
It looks to me like on this part of the graph.
It looks like it's climbing too. That's why the only reason I was asking. So
Yeah.
yeah, we get deeper as you go this way, but then you have this one out here. So
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
just curious.
gonna have to go and check the note because I printed mine off. And I didn't look at it until out in the truck and I'm going, "Oh, what happened to that?" Well, I'll go back and check. It looks to me like it's supposed to be high.
Oh, my goodness.
So one of the other things we can do is PAC, which percentage of the lake bottom is covered with weeds.
Okay.
And so what happens is, the data is tabulated and we can see exactly if it's 50% of the lake bottom has weeds growing on it, or 10% of the lake bottom has weeds growing on it. And again, we can see, and this is for 3 years. I mean, we can go back to every year we surveyed. But you can see in 22, that was the highest, basically from the 1 meter level all the way up to 5 meters.
Yeah.
We had somewhere between, almost close to 90, 100% weed cover on the bottom of the lake. Whereas back in 21, it was reduced quite a bit.
Interpret that for me, because when you said the algae, that would count that also.
Yes.
Right. So that it's not necessarily, is it bad to have that on the bottom of the lake?
Depends on what it is, but
The surface of the lake that we're concerned about.
yeah,
mostly, right?
it depends on what the consistency is of what is down there. I mean, if it's native weeds that are going up to the surface, that's not good. If it's algae that's growing on the bottom, that's good. But you can tell that when you go to these depths of what is out there and what isn't out there, when you look at all these different graphs that we can.
Yeah, there's a lot in it.
So I guess we did. I guess we went back to 2017, and here's the different bio volumes that were in the lake from 2017 to 2022. And you can see there's not much of a pattern. I think if we remark the treatment years, the fluoride treatment years, we'd be able to get a little bit more understanding of what we've got going out there. Okay, so we've done the survey, we did all this evaluation, and then we went out and we're ready to treat the lake. So the pre-treatment notices were sent out as they normally were. Well, they weren't sent out, they were hand delivered. And then on 6/13, we did the first lily pad application. And that was a fairly easy application. There weren't, I'm not gonna say that there were a lot of lily pads.
So are you saying 6/18? 6/13.
6/13, we did lily pads.
So 618, you did the other.
Yeah, we came back on 6/18,
Okay.
we sprayed the
So the-
submerged weeds, and again, we checked
Okay.
to see any of the lily pads that we missed, we resprayed them. So the yellow area is obviously the areas that we had sprayed for submerged weeds. I don't know how many acres it was. I think it was. I think we probably did around 15 acres. But again, we didn't do anything
Yes,
else.
it's 15 acres.
All right. We didn't treat anything out in the main basin of the lake. We came back out on the lake on August 15th and performed another lily pad application. That was the last time the boat was out on the lake. At that same time, we did the fall survey. And you can see, I think in the next picture, next page, I hope. Yeah, there it is. It's a comparison between the map on the left is the spring survey. The map on the right is the fall survey. So you can see that there was considerable reduction visually from plant growth. There's very few red areas left on the lake. A greater area of blue, and a lot of the whole shallow areas of the lake, you're going to anticipate green. This is just so shallow.
Yeah.
So we do the same thing. We go back. Now we can go back and compare the percentage of the lake bottom covered with weeds before and after the treatment. And so that's the first graph up on the top. And then we do the same thing for bio volume. And you can see the big difference in bio volume from the spring and the fall. And these are all good tools to tell you the treatment worked. If this bio volume graph was even, or the light green was all the way up to the dark green, then the treatment didn't work. Same with the percent of area covered. But these are pretty good results. We only did one drone survey this year. That was done in June, middle of June, late June. Oh, you got it.
So yeah, just hit it. Just kind of showed up. So you can watch it if you want. It's only 2 minutes.
Just so we don't have to watch Biden again.
We tried to get out to do the second survey. We bought a new drone. And the thing is just, it's so super technical. We've been messing with it. I think we finally got it under control. I feel safe in bringing it out.
Can you see that, Jody? Can you
Yes,
see the?
Oh, you can see it. Okay.
Okay, great.
yep, I can see it. Thanks.
Doug, what temperature did you say that things start emerging?
I'm gonna say, it's gonna be 64, 65, somewhere in that range.
What was the question?
What's that?
What was the question?
What temperature range you would first really see the plants come up?
I can graph that. I hope it takes temperature data too.
Oh,
Oh, look at that.
oh, that's brilliant. Oh, those look nice, huh? You see them? The paint?
Yeah, I haven't seen them.
Yeah, it's nice.
You look at this thing, you can see exactly how many wetlands are out in this lake.
Increasing. The green wetlands and.
I think it's increasing.
Oh, look at that little teeny arrows.
Getting narrower and narrower.
It's happens, yeah.
Oh, that's helpful.
Oh, look at that.
And you can see where we all paddle around. Yeah, for sure now. That's great.
There, there's the Peter Lodge.
See the little trails.
Nice.
With a-
That was
Fewer
helpful.
highways.
I think in the winter, we always have this thing like, did that island move? But, you know, when I see it like this, it's no. I don't know.
Well, I think, now, I should
They
check
just
out,
go
I
up
think
and
the
down.
drone, the new drone will take a GPS coordinate of the islands. I'll check. All right, so, and that's basically what we did this year on the lake. So the recommendations for next year are that we really want to check the success of the dicot treatment out. Not only, you know, hopefully it'll be as effective or more effective than the fluoride treatment. It's a lot cheaper. A lot cheaper, probably half.
So you said the first one.
Cheapest,
As long as it does a similar job.
Well, we're gonna find out. I'm pretty confident we're probably gonna see it does.
Because you said the first recommendation listed was to continue early and late seasonal drone surgery.
Correct.
I think this really is helpful. And then you said,
And then, you know, as we get next year, I think, or this year, if we're looking at weed control, one area, there are obviously there's 2 or 3 areas where their access is limited, like Kathy's trying to get into Kathy's place. And then Lene is, you know, trying to get into that area. Those are some 2 areas that are pretty critical of having access.
people being able to go completely. around the
Exactly.
lake like
So-
they want to do it.
Any treating, and those are the 2 top priorities to treat if they're required. And the question I'm always, it's hard for me to answer is when, what's the threshold? You know, what's the threshold that the property owners on Barnes Lake want before we treat? I mean, we work with a lake up in Snohomish County, and they wait until the weeds are just, they don't have a problem with a tremendous amount of weeds. And then we have other lakes like Gravely Lake that they don't want to see one weed in the lake. So every lake has their own threshold of what the property owners feels appropriate for them. And I don't think we've really ever established that on Barnes Lake. I think what we've done is, you know, we've gone out, we've made surveys, we made recommendations, and normally you follow our recommendations.
Well, I think that's what this group's for, right?
Yeah.
We're here to say, this is when we think it's,
Well,
it's kind of what we think is the.
At what point of the growth would one get the optimal
Exactly.
result?
Yeah.
When it's this big or when it's this big?
Well, it's not, it's,
Or does it make no difference?
on Barnes Lake, it doesn't make a difference. The difference is, what can the residents live with? I mean, do they mind having a little, you know, having weeds to paddle through when they go out in their boats? Do they
Well, it's
mind-
better if there's not too many.
and what density of weeds? Obviously, if they get real thick, I mean, they gotta be treated. But there's a really fine line. And it seems like it's worked in the past, but it's something that, you know, we should think about for the
You're
future.
bringing it up, I'm just wondering why. Is there, I mean,
Well, because we get questions about
do you,
threshold all the time, yeah.
from Barnes Lake? Really? People who want it, what, sooner? Oh,
Well, I mean, when you go around the lake, it gets pretty rough to get like in that corner.
yeah, no, for
the
sure.
Corners.
Yeah.
And I guess there's some sense too that if they're not treated, they're like gonna overtake and not be treatable.
Right.
So,
I mean, is it a problem to do it a month earlier?
Do what?
The
Spray.
treatment, yeah, do the spraying,
Well,
instead of doing it in May, do it in April, or June,
no,
June.
April's way too early. May
Okay.
is too early.
But you see,
So May is too early, so we're doing it in June.
I'm thinking that really you're the person
Yeah.
to decide at what is the optimum time. Is it, I mean, if there's no point in doing it when everything's so low because there's nothing to spray. And if you wait till August when it's all this high, it's too much. to do.
Well, that's, again.
And also, what are you able to do?
The timeline isn't the issue. The issue is density of the plants that you can live with in the lake. Some, as I said, some lake associations can live with 20%. They don't have a problem with it. Other lake associations can live with 80%. Some lake associations live with 0%.
so what percentage would you say we have then?
I'm gonna say you guys were probably around, since it's a wetland and there's areas that you really don't have access to. You're probably in the maybe 40%, 50% range, somewhere in that range
Wouldn't want to go too
for
much.
densities.
And what time of year would be 40%?
It's gonna be,
You see what I mean?
yeah, early June, sometime June.
Yeah.
Which is what you've normally been doing.
If that approach is, and what we've been doing in the past has been acceptable, then we can continue that. But we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with lead thresholds.
You know, and I think it will help, Doug, the more you bring, you know, this kind of data back for them to understand where those
Yeah,
thresholds are, where you're talking 20% or 40%. I mean, frame of reference is gonna be helpful, you know,
Yeah.
for the committee. And so I think seeing these numbers, recognizing what they see on the lake, you know, it helps them draw those lines. And so, you know, you'll see as we get to the scope, you know, Doug and I were, you know, emailing earlier today, and, you know, one of the things we added in there was, you know, following the surveys, to come back, give you guys a lowdown, you know, rundown of what that data suggests, and then you get to make a decision. You know, what does the treatment levels look like
Yeah.
beyond that? Because you'll see, I handed you all out a kind of a budget update. You'll see with some of the costs that we've updated.
Yeah.
You know, budget's gonna be a thing you need to focus on.
Yeah.
You know, so,
I guess I always thought that we were working on water level management. You know, so I guess maybe there's two things at play. One of them is water level, that if we,
Well, water level management was in play was seriously in play when we did the Ford home. It's not as critical with the dicot because it's only dicot is only used once. So it's treated early in the year.
okay, so that's, see, I think that's a piece of this that, you know, we've always been like, whenever, however late it can be, but you still have water to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Based on the temperatures that Doug suggested, I just did a quick data analysis on the 60, if we're looking at 65 degrees. In 2021, it hit 65 degrees on June 28th. So that's when we start seeing emergence. 2022, we hit 65 degrees in July 20th. So, I mean, there's a big difference.
that's-
It's a
I'm
big difference in
surprised.
temperature.
Because things are getting warmer, aren't they?
Mhm. Even if you drop it to 64 degrees, you're only looking at like 4 days prior to those dates. So that time frame, if you wanted to, you know, go off of, you know, the
60
emergence-
degrees is like the lowest you want to go.
Last summer / spring was unusually cold.
Mhm.
Oh,
We
yeah.
remember, it didn't get warm until the end of July last summer.
We had that heat
That
wave
was-
in 2021.
Yeah,
too.
And 2021, we had.
Yeah, and you can see that in the
early-
temperature, it just went straight up.
And
So
that
last
seems
year-
totally contrary to everything in world,
Oh,
in
yeah.
world weather, everywhere's going up,
There's always. a
except for
year-
Barnes Lake.
There's always a year here and there that doesn't
Went up to
Doesn't fall
London.
into line.
Well, I was just hearing something on the radio about the difference between last year and the year before, it was much higher everywhere.
Yes, maybe that's something we can keep an eye on, is just when the temperatures start raising up, reaching out to Doug, like, hey, we're seeing temperature around 58, 59 degrees or whatever.
Because you have
With the
like
gradient.
daily
Daily,
access.
yeah.
Oh, it
it'll give me-
feeds straight in.
Yeah, it'll give me daily, yeah, if I go out there, do a data dump, it'll give me a daily temperature reading.
Really.
So how do you get the optimum result? Doing spraying when things are early and barely visible, or when they're in full up and there's plenty of room to
Optimal
spray?
results are when the weeds are about a foot to 18, 8 foot to 18 inches off the bottom.
And then you don't really see them. They're not. So how do you know they're there?
From the survey.
Ah, right.
From the survey.
No, nobody's diving down to have a look.
No.
We haven't seen that yet.
You're not gonna.
It's only 6 inches.
Up that 10-foot lake.
Glug, glug, glug.
Well, years ago, we used to do that. The diver would have a diving board on the back of the boat and
Seriously.
you pull him out 20 feet behind the boat and he'd go around the bottom looking at the weeds.
So really, we've got to make a decision about when to spray when you can see nothing.
What are you gonna cover?
If you think about it, if it's all down here,
Cover 7.
how do we judge?
That was never seen.
It's Doug's. You're the judge, realize that.
Yeah,
Over
so-
where ours is, Judith, it's not deep enough. We can tell right away.
Yeah. I'm always looking.
That tree is not bad.
So one of the other things we want to finish is the modification of the boat launch. I mean, we had some real bruiser work done this year.
Is that in Gary's?
Stumps.
No, it's a big famous.
Oh, at Dana's.
The
Oh,
Dana's,
right,
yeah.
Right, yeah. Oh,
I mean, they did an incredible job there. So this year, when the water level goes down, I think we're gonna bring some rock in to extend it out a little bit, because some of that rock has just disappeared into the water.
Did you look at the different depths? Cause I think over by, where the fallen tree is, it's deeper than where you guys were launching.
Yeah, I think we're gonna maintain the site that we're at.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I think we're gonna maintain that site, because there's a good rock base.
Oh, that's
We
right.
just have to build it up a little bit.
Okay.
Probably all.
The other thing that was really surprised me was we were working on another project, a wetland project, and I came across some information about wetlands. Basically, wetlands are negative and positive on a lake system. In the springtime and the summertime, they take nutrients out of the water system. In the wintertime, when they die off, they put nutrients back into the water system. But in bars, there's so much water flow through the lake in the wintertime that the nutrients that these wetlands create when they decay just flush right out of the lake.
How? What?
So I'm not following. What are you saying?
so how did they go out?
So how did they get out of the lake?
Through the outlet.
Oh, I
Through the
see.
outflow. Through the outflow.
the outflow.
Through the outflow.
You mean because the
gets
one
under
lake
the-
level gets high
The
and
lake level's high,
it's good stuff.
and the leaves are decomposed, the nutrients
see,
are
and
in the water.
And then that goes to the,
Exactly.
uh,
And so that exits the lake. So that's a positive. But then when we work on this other project, we came across a number that was really kind of shocked me. Is the fact that 1 acre of wetlands removes 13 pounds of phosphorus from your system. And I started thinking about this, I'm going, well, I always wondered, why does Barnes Lake not have an algae problem? And that's it right there. You got over 5 acres of wetlands, so you're removing over 25 pounds of phosphorus. a season out of the lake. And I'm pretty sure if you were to take those 25 pounds of phosphorus and put it into the calculation of what you have during the summer in the lake, I think you're probably gonna be above the threshold for algae blooms.
So you're
So
saying
we're
like the
good.
shallow,
No, we're good with that then.
So
This is
it
good, so
would be
but-
worse.
Yeah, and if there were no wetlands on Barnes Lake, I can almost guarantee that you'd have an incredible algae problem.
So what do you consider a
I thought
wetland?
we cannot.
Wetland is, well, the islands are wetlands, all of that shoreline vegetation. If the plants, yeah, the cattails are considered wetland plants,
Yeah.
any wetland plants, so even some of those woody shrubs that are in the water.
Yeah.
Even some of the plants that are in a marsh type environment. I mean, you walk down to your beach and it's really soggy and mushy. Even though those plants are not underwater. They're considered wetland plants. Yeah. So, it's important that the residents on the lake realize that. I mean, residents can go out and they can cut down the cattails because they're gonna grow back again. And they can go down and cut down a lot of the stuff, but they can't go in there and spray a lot of the stuff. Because once they kill it, it's done. And you lose that benefit. Of a nutrient sink.
And if I remember correctly, you can see where people have treated.
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely.
Why? Because it looks so dead and.
Yeah, it looks so pool-like.
Yeah. I think if you go back to some of the aerial videos, you can see where the plants are dying. They're yellow.
That was great. By stuff in the. back of the
So that's,
magazine.
that's where people have been doing their own spraying.
Yeah, well, oh, yeah.
Yeah. I see.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious when you drive around the shoreline and both sides of our property are just totally wetland plants, and then there's a 50-foot section where there's nothing. I mean, they just don't disappear. I mean,
How about like over time? Are they some of the old sites that, clearly have been personally treated? Are those still visible to even today?
I'd have to, go on the map and look at them.
Yeah, I mean, it is a temptation for people to keep their, use treatment, but
That is, I mean, and it's,
hopefully because of we getting out there and making things better, people don't feel like they have to take it on themselves.
we run into this problem a lot with residents chopping out wetlands at ocean shores through their canal system. And they've got cattails and water iris here, you can't see a house from the shoreline. So somebody will come in to buy a house and bang a living out there cutting forms
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And you can see why. I mean, they want some type of access. They want to be a visual sight of the water. But some of them just go way overboard and they'll take the whole 50 feet out. Really shouldn't do.
That's
So-
interesting.
Well, and then we were also talking about having like the individual lot wetlands be together. Like this neighbor and that neighbor have
Yeah.
a shared. wetland.
So it's, it's something the residents have to be aware of. That live on the lake. Basically, you don't want to be greedy. Take out too much of your shoreline vegetation. Okay, other than that, and then I guess we go through the budget, and I think that's.
oh, I got that. Next
that's-
conversation, Doug.
Thanks,
So
Doug.
you want to take a, request for a motion to accept the treatment report?
Oh.
So
Get a
moved.
motion.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Hey,
Get that posted to the website.
It's neat
Was
how
that
the
Tom?
technology over time.
Jody vote?
Oh, and Tom.
Jody, Tom, you guys are in support of the plan?
yeah, I voted yes there, and we'll just need to get copies of it and go through some review, individual review, and then start working on some of the questions that Doug has built into it. You know, we need to come up with the answers for some of his questions there. You know, what is our threshold for the various weeds and what actions do we want to take at those various threshold levels?
All right, so the next thing, I'm gonna stop sharing this for now, and I'm gonna go and share another document. Just go where is it? Go. Okay, so what you see here is the scope of work. It was in your packet. I have modified it just based on some conversations I've had with Doug this week. And so some minor modifications to better match the scope. So I made some changes up here. You might recognize there was 5 bullets, but they didn't have corresponding sections. So they've been kind of just adjusted along that lines. So the changes that were made, so the scope of work, let's just kind of start here. So the first element of it really is the aquatic vegetation survey mapping. This is the drone surveys and then the digital surveys that you saw in Doug's report, the density maps, the temperature, as well as the percent coverage, things like that. So those would be included in there. At least one digital survey to be completed by June 30th of each year. Digital maps and hard copies provided to the city and by extension the LMD no later than July 31st to ensure the data is available. Part of that, so what we've added here, so again, you have the drone video survey as well in here. According to the scope, we've got 2 drone surveys that we completed. First one no later than June 30th, kind of correspond with, basically what Doug was saying earlier, doing the, collecting the data, coming back and presenting to the committee to determine what level of treatment, you would be like to move forward with. And, just recognizing it doesn't need anything significant, or verbal or email authorization is sufficient for the city to provide Doug notice. But basically, wanted you to have the opportunity to understand what the results of the surveys we're talking about, so that way you could make a decision about what level of treatment would be in there. So this still does contemplate a Floridone application. However, as stated above, it would be based on Doug's recommendations, what vegetation you're seeing out there and what material to best apply out there. 2024 was previously considered, the year for the Floridone application. So this is just contemplating that as well as some of the other ones that are in there.
Now, was it Floridone that you said? There's a replacement for?
Yeah,
Right. So again, this is really just it's contemplating all potential actions, right? But this is saying that Doug is going to do the surveys and he's going to come back and he's going to give you some recommendation based on those surveys. And then you get to make the decision at that point. So this is really just narrative that provides for the opportunity to use other materials. But we also have Aquafol K in here. I don't think you mentioned Diquat in here, but it is down on our table. The other addition that I've provided since you received your packet was just basically acknowledging, boat access, and that the contractor would need to do some stuff to make sure that it's safe and sufficient to launch the boat. And that the contractor would manage those improvements to the project site, including any permits that may or may not be needed for that work. Following that is reporting, same language as we've had every year, that he would make sure that all the reports are done to the Department of Ecology under the permit, as well as provide a summary of the vegetation management program and recommendations for future actions. As needed shoreline treatment, this is reflecting, if there are, additional needs along the shoreline that are within the purview of the LMD, that that would come out and do that as well.
So that's the yellow flag, iris, for example.
Well, yeah, look, yellow flag iris, purple loosestrife, whatever.
Okay. That type.
That kind of stuff. It's just as needed shoreline treatments that would be covered under the scope of work. Let's see. Next, we get to the schedule of costs. So this had been basically revised from previous version. So what you see in here is the most current version based on increased cost of materials and labor that Doug had indicated would be necessary for this coming year. So before we get into that, I actually have it in a different format as well, but basically it's two of the areas that had increased. I believe was looking at, the admin services pieces is $8,000. Previously, we were a little bit less than that, as well as the surveys. The cost for the surveys have increased this year. Labor went up slightly. The biggest change here you're going to see is in the material selection, at least for 2023. And so we had previously had, I would say, $5,000 or $6,000 kind of outlined there, and Doug indicating that different materials might need to be used, would have a different financial footprint, so to speak. I also added in floating mat support, no vegetative control. This is based on the conversations that we've had about having Doug come out and do work where you're not treating any vegetation, but moving mats around, doing some other bits and pieces in there. The key to keep in mind, anytime Doug comes out on a boat, regardless of what he does, about $2,200. Thinking about limited budgets, that's basically what you're looking at there. This miscellaneous services, launch site improvements, etc. It's a kind of a contingency fund, but recognizing that some materials would be needed for that, put that in here as well. That brings a subtotal for 2023 about $27,250. With the management reserve of $3,000, this is something comes up at the end of the year. The city, has, I like to keep management reserve about 10%, of the contract cost, just to provide in case there's any things that need to be addressed throughout the year for some reasons. So for the 2-year cost, $30,250 in first year, $36,800. The biggest distinction there is, again, still conceptualizing Floridone being used in 2024 for that piece. That is the difference between material costs between two contracts, but it'll be a 2-year contract of $67,050. Below here is just some of the itemized costs that were used to develop the overall table, so you can see that in there. So that's the revised scope of work. Before I would ask Vice Chair Linnea to call for a vote on that. It's important that we take a look at the fiscal implication to the budget. Let me make sure I'm sharing this screen as well.
This is what we've got.
That's what you have in front of you, and I'll share it to folks on the TV land. Let's see here. Okay. So this is really, when you see, when you're looking at this budget, I'm going to see if I can. All right, we can't see you anymore, Jody or Tom, so speak up if you need something. Okay. Or you have a question. Thanks. So what I did is I've updated this chart, these papers you have in front of you, to reflect the lake management costs per that scope of work that you see in here. As you know, we only conceptualized in the budget that was approved. So the assessment revenue line, the line that you see here highlighted, that is basically what's been approved, as far as it has a 5% increase from the assessment revenues coming in annually. You see that increase, you can see that climbing. The previous forecast that we had constructed only conceptualized a significant treatment under lake management every 4 years. All right, so you can see here 25,000, 4 years later, 29,000, 4 years later, 34,000.
Yeah.
So there was an escalator built into those costs as well. Didn't necessarily conceptualize a lake management treatment cost of 19,000 in the coming year.
Yeah.
The big difference that makes there, it takes your surplus that you had, the minor surplus that you had at the end of the life term of a couple $1,000s, I forget what it was, but it makes it a negative deficit of 22,463. So you can see that, the choices that get made today have an implication towards the end. And so debt costs would start incurring at 1%, as you start getting here as well. So those would be additional costs, as debt is incurred. But you can see, so, making a change early on has a lot of downstream effects, down there. And so I think, that's where, when, Doug comes back and looks at, makes recommendations, following the treatment survey, you'll want to be very conscious about what those costs are going to do downstream. Or we'll be, potentially looking at another assessment increase somewhere down the line. Regardless, if we were to keep the budget, as it is, as you see it here for the scope of work. And I do recognize the awkwardness of negotiating that scope of work with the committee while Doug is in the room. But it will, if we kept the expense budget the same, where it stands right now, it would still require a budget enhancement at the city's level. So we would have to bring this back to the city council for their consideration for a budget amendment, because these are the approved budgets for the last, for this biennium 23 and 24. So we're already at a variance there. It's not an insurmountable effort, but it's still just, recognizing that's another step in a process that we would have to go through. Not before we approve the scope of work, but at some point over the next year, we would have to do a budget amendment with the city.
So Dan, just, and I know you work with this stuff all the time, and I don't. But I mean, like when I'm seeing red numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And where I see the red numbers down at the bottom on the ending fund balance. I mean, that means absent decisions by the city council to do something.
Yeah, if you just implemented the program over the next 2 years and made no other changes and all of the other costs, were maintained, you would be in a negative fund balance, meaning the LMD would actually owe the city that much money. And so the city, I mean, we're not gonna let you get that far. We would basically tell Doug, you don't have money to do work, if we got to that place.
I see.
And we would still have to collect the assessments. Does that make sense?
Sure.
The city's not gonna let you get that far into debt. But the city has agreed that, if there's some slight overages, you can float that debt, but we need a financial plan that gets you as close to zero by the end of the term.
I see. So, but it's not that the city council would authorize more funding.
They can't do that without an assessment increase. What we just did last year to, get last year to get the 5% annual, we would have to go through that same process. Because the city can't just create revenue for the LMD. The LMD has to create its own revenue.
Dan,
So-
I'm
Sorry.
kind of reading between the lines in what you just said, that if, for example, in 2025, we are $1,200 in the red,
Mhm.
the city would probably cover that for us.
We're gonna cover that, but that's where you start to incur debt costs. And so, yes, you'd have to get it back. You would cover that kind of cost. I don't know. I mean, I could say if, you got a financial forecast, it even puts you in the hole. Previously, we were talking about 12, 13,000, but you would pay a debt fee because the ensuing years after that, you'd be replenishing those funds, but the revenues in the treatment paradigm would diminish.
And so at the very least, we cannot really expect to cruise into 2028 and be $17,000 in the red.
Without a plan to recover it.
So we need to.
Which might be, all right, we suspend treatment operations for 2 years. What that might or might not do to the lake is a different question, but that could be a solution at that point, right?
Or we could up the.
Or you could, you could do the assessments, provided as long as we stay within there. And I think there's still some cushion between the original passage of the ordinance that you had to stay below a certain threshold.
I think that the number that puts this thing out of whack is the chemical number. So like for 2022, how much down there for chemicals?
6820, but it's lake management, so that includes your some of the other pieces in there.
But I think, if you take let's say 2022, if you take the chemical component out of that, if there is no treatment required in 2022, then that number on that flow sheet would become a zero.
So yeah, for example, right, like for 2023, because that's where we're at, 2020, 22 is already expended. So if we're talking about 2023, and we just said zero, right? Not gonna do any work, this year on for chemical treatment. You can still do, you know, some of the surveys, you can still do some of the other stuff, but you're not gonna do it. So you just, now you're, you know, you're not, you know, getting into debt territory until, you know, 2032, and then, you know, you have an $1,800
Oh,
deficit
whoa,
by the end of the
man,
year.
you're brilliant. How do you do that so fast? Just those calculations.
So that's the implication, right? But that's also not necessarily a realistic,
I
you know, approach at this point. But, you know, and I mean, Doug, to your credit, you've always quoted high and come in low,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, that tends to be that aspect. I also know that you're using different materials at different volumes now, which is increasing the overall treatment costs, you know? Would we expect a, you know, a final bill for the vegetation management at $19,000? I've never seen Doug reach his threshold yet, you know, so, you know, I think overall there's some flexibility there.
Yeah.
You know, but I think it also comes down to getting some of this work done, the drone work done, to really evaluate what needs to be done, and then maybe taking a closer look at, you know, where we're at with the budget. You know, and see, okay, Doug, what do you think is the best course of action? You know, I think Doug at that point would have a much better idea of the materials he needs to use. I mean, he's just kind of spitballing now based on his professional experience, but like, he doesn't know, he hasn't done the survey, he doesn't know what the vegetation's coming back at. He can't make a good determination. So, you know, to what I see Doug doing here is, well, let's be conservative in our approach for treatment, you know, and if we can scale it back when we have the data to support a treatment program, you know, we can talk about that in a couple of months once we collect that data.
Yes, I know for 2023, that's a worst case scenario.
Good. That's
That's
what
the
we,
worst case.
well, that's
scenario.
what we should plan for.
The worst case.
Worst case scenario also puts you $25,000 in the hole.
Right,
Yeah,
right. But you should, that's, to me, that's great.
So how would it, if we got to the point where it was, everything was becoming terribly expensive and decided this year we won't do anything? How much, how do you calculate the damage that not doing anything would cause in that 1 year? And would it be able to retrieve the damage and make up for it the following year? Do you know what I mean?
Financially, we can model that. Environmentally, I think that's.
It's the
Doug's- I
environmental
think that's
problem.
Doug's work.
I think from that question, I think one of the components is that you really want to key in on is the lily pad spraying. You want to make sure that at least the pads are sprayed at least once a year. Minimum.
That's the priority one.
That's the priority. I mean, you can skip a weed treatment and live with the weeds in the lake for a season, for a year. I mean, they're never gonna be so bad that you're not gonna be able to use the lake, that you're not gonna be able to take your boat out through it. It's just a matter of, you know, what your perspective is of what you can or cannot live with. And if the budget doesn't support it, well, then you have to live with it. But I can almost guarantee there's never gonna be a time on Barnes Lake where you're not gonna be able to get out to the main part of the lake.
But the thing with the lily pads are on the
On the way.
surface.
That's,
Well, they're on the surface, so
Then you
we
can
see
get
them
rid
all
of
the time. If it's stuff hanging in the.
because I know after that first Florida true, we kind of backed off on a Brasinia spraying and the lily pad spraying a little bit, thinking that the Florida was gonna, you know, do the great job. Well, it did for 2 years. And then the pads just came back really strong.
Really? Okay.
You know, I mean, another alternative, you know, for this existing, because, you know, I'm gonna need, you know, a motion, you know, on budgets, you know, today as well, and for this scope of work. I mean, another option is to reduce the management reserve. You know, that gives the city less flexibility to, you know, oh, hey, Doug, this thing happened. Can you go out and take care of it? Yeah, sure. You know, we would have to, you know, make sure it fits within one of the other boxes. You know, but that's, you know, another way we could reduce costs, you know, through this. You know, or, you know, there's also, you know, $2,200, you know, dollars in here for, you know, floating mat management. Was that something that's still a priority for the committee to think about? You know, so there is some room in this existing scope, in this existing budget, you know, for some flexibility if you want to address it today. The alternative is accept this today and, you know,
So what do we need a motion?
recognizing that there's a financial. well, one, to accept the scope of work so I can bring it forward to council for their, for their execution. And then based on that scope of work, approving the modified budget, so that I can also present that to the city council.
So Dan, if we reduce the management reserve to 2,000 for 2023, and then for 2,000 to 2024, that at least balances our budget until 2028.
Doing that, you're still 2028, you're still
We're kicking the can.
Yeah. a little bit. But like, let's just say we said 2250, right? So that would be what, 17,000 there for those two things that I just acknowledged changing. So yeah, I mean, you're still in that same time frame. You're still in a deficit. Future years are potentially impacted. This would have to come down to 5. No, it's $5. What is that one? So $5,000, from a lake management perspective, you're not really looking at deficits in significant ways until 2032. So 10 years from now.
Okay, this is Tom. Can I ask a question here? So I think I heard Doug say he needs to know what our action levels are for weed management actions. And I think my understanding is that the invasive water lily has always been kind of the trigger for that's what we want to control the most. What I missed was the Roundup, essentially the water safe Roundup that we used. Is that the recommended treatment for those water lilies? And the price of that, as I understand, was much lower than the Florida. Does that all sound right?
The glyphosate, the Roundup, is the cheapest material that can be used for lily pad control.
So I guess the crux of my question is to address Dan's issue about our budget. It looks like controlling the 2023 cost would be one way to do that. And if our real weed of concern is the water lily, and we can treat that for $5,000 instead of $19,000, is that maybe a step that helps us maintain control the lake weeds, but doesn't break our budget at the same time?
Yeah, I don't see it being a problem.
I mean, I've got a lot wrapped into there, and I just, my recollection is that the water lily is what we care about the most.
Well, just from a budget standpoint, material wise, you're looking at the materials we've used on the lake. Massive pier and Struggle pier are anywhere from $160 to $185 a gallon. Whereas if you go with the glyphosate, you're looking at about $60 a gallon, $50 a gallon. So that's, $100 a gallon difference right there.
Okay, so Dan, the question that is on the table is when you're saying we want to accept this management plan, is that accepting the particular chemicals that have already been mentioned and this spending plan for the next couple of years, or is that something that we still have time to consider, accept this general plan, but we can have a month to talk about different chemicals, different actual dollar costs for those chemicals, and flesh out the details of the plan?
Well, my concern with limiting yourself to glyphosate and just saying, slashing the budget in half to utilize that chemical solely as a treatment paradigm for 2023 limits the vegetation you're going to be able to address. It has to be a surface, right? Because it has to be a surficially applied, if just solely lily pads. If that's all you're looking at treatment this year, then you're not talking about the bladderwort. You're not talking about, any of the other species that, Doug has identified as more of the emergent species that are floating in the water column. You'd only be able to address the plants that have an exposed leaf on the surface, which would be the lily pads. And so that's limiting your treatment paradigm, for this year. If that's a direction you want to go, that is, as Doug said, it's an obvious direction you can go in. I think glyphosate is still approved by the state, not necessarily the county. So
But
know,
that, so
that
that-
could
that's
be-
what I'm, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying essentially is Doug built into his earlier presentation, the questions of what are our action levels for the various types of weeds? And maybe I missed that part of the discussion, but I don't know if we have decided on what our action levels are. And that's why I'm saying my impression was that the lily pads were the most urgent item of action.
Right, and again, you know, we also talked about Doug doing those surveys and coming back with recommendations to, you know, to best suit what's actually growing. And, you know, so the committee can make a decision on what those thresholds are, because I can't make those decisions for you. You know, that's a decision that the committee needs to make based on the data that Doug can present once he does the surveys.
Right, but that $19,000 line is for treatments, right?
Yes,
Surveys and reports is the next item down, $8,000. So that it's not the surveys that break the bank, it's the treatment that breaks the bank.
correct.
So that, okay, so that's, so are you saying that by voting to approve this, that we can defer the decision to spend that $19,000? Or by accepting this plan, does it lock us in to spending the $19,000?
To lock you into spending it, no, you still get to make that choice down the road.
Right.
All right,
But just recognizing that if you do choose to spend the 19,000, you have a budget conversation that has to happen later on this year.
Right.
And in the next year, as we set the new budgets.
okay, so accepting this the way it's laid out now doesn't lock us into spending 19,000 this year and 25,000 next year.
No.
Okay, well, all right, I second that we approve it then.
Did we have somebody?
Did he make the motion?
Nobody's made a motion yet, Tom.
Was that a motion?
Let's do a motion.
Make the motion.
I have a question, about, it's the item 4 about bladderwort treatment, and you were saying 3 to 5 years. Where are we on that 3 to 5 year cycle?
We treated it in 2020.
Yeah, you're year 3.
So we're on 3.
Okay. All right,
So do
and I
we-
make a motion.
To approve the
But
budget.
again, that targeted date has been skewed because we applied dicot last year to control bladderwort.
Yeah.
So that number, that date may be 2026, I may not be 2025.
That's, bladderwort is nasty.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's hard to compete in.
It's a little snowflake, right?
No, isn't that the stuff that's real clingy? What's bladderwort?
Bladderwort is the one that comes up to the surface, it kind of looks like a star.
Yes.
It has a little, has a yellow
Yeah.
flower that comes
Yeah,
up out of
and
the
it
surface.
just covers the whole.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
back.
bladderwort.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of.
So we have a motion to approve,
To budget.
accept the budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
One time.
And then we have to approve his
Scope of work.
scope of work, right?
Were there any changes to the scope of work that you wanted to see? By approving the budget, you basically approved the
Yeah.
scope of work, so.
Right.
So, but it's something that we just, based on the information from
Exactly.
the drones. I like the 2 drone approach. 2. That's 3.
Any other discussion on the scope of work? Okay. I guess just as for a formality's sake, another vote, a motion to approve the scope of work. Somebody want to make that motion?
Sure.
Rusty,
I
second?
move that we accept the scope of work.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Why do we say?
Tom?
I can.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I had said aye and amongst all that, yes, for approval.
Thank you. Well, covered all the things I needed tonight, so thank you.
Loading mat management? Wrong time of year for that, but it's on the agenda.
I think that's kind of like a continuation from the last meeting as to
Watchful waiting.
Is that whether or
So we
not?
did include one day in the scope of work for floating mat management, because there's no treatment, it's a 10-hour day. So that is included in the cost. And so I guess really what the committee needs to determine today is, what are we telling Doug to do?
Yeah.
And this management would consist solely of Doug pushing the mats to individual property owners'
Correct.
backyards.
You can push that one in front of me, over in front of the school. No, you-
And the other decision has to be made is, where does the LMD want us to push the mats?
To the school, to DOT.
They just float back to me.
Oh, is that right? Every once in a while, one floats up in our
You think
direction,
you
but it
could-
usually goes back.
Goes away.
If you think you can,
We
if
go
it
south.
came up to my land, you said we could probably chop it up.
Yeah, we'll probably chop it up.
I could get a couple strong
Chop it up
cheap
and what?
guys to
Chop it up and do what?
bring it up, throw it up on.
Oh, put it on land,
Move it
Yeah.
on,
like
yeah.
Gary did.
So
Anybody
then
know any cheap labor?
are you taking volunteers, names, people who want floating mats in front of their yard, or how do we do this?
Why would people want to have floating mats?
To build up their.
Well,
So
to build
pull it
up
out.
your.
No, no, to
property.
get it out
Pull
there.
it out and put it in your flower beds.
Yeah.
I thought our last discussion
Great
dealt
stuff.
with, like if,
Ed's got-
when Gary said, oh, we got a floating mat floating down the center of the lake, it's gonna end up somewhere. We gotta go out and secure it or move it, so it doesn't end up on somebody's property.
Well,
Yeah, I think those are floating mats, and then the other ones that don't have the vegetation on them, they're called something else.
Oh, is that right?
It's all floating, yes.
No, we have a different one.
But
Muck box.
Yes,
Muck box.
Bombs.
Mud bombs.
they're
I like
like,
it.
they're like mud,
He just made that up.
oh,
yeah.
No, that's a scientific term.
Oh, yeah.
Bad boy.
What atomic
A
number
mud
is
bomb.
I think the difference was that the mud bombs you can pull out.
Or
The
makes.
floating mats are just a ball of roots that you cannot.
and they can.
Are
regrow.
they grounded? I mean, do they go down to the bottom and?
No, they're
They
floating.
may or
but
may
they're
not,
so
but they're
thick,
just
isn't it?
all, yeah, they're just thick and they're just full of roots, and breaking them up is hard, yeah.
It's like if you're going your lawn and dig up your grass.
You don't have to
Try and
worry.
Break it apart.
so with two alternatives kind of, in front of the group, one being, does Doug just take these mats, push them over to the school district and lock them in there? Somebody should probably reach out to the school district and make sure that that's an okay option for them, since it's their shoreline. And then the other piece is, do we deliver them to people's properties? And, there's only 6 property owners around this table, so, 8, folks on TV land, is it something you want to take back to your neighbors and ask them, what would you like? Would you like a mat? I mean, so we can give Doug pretty clear direction, or is it just that, when Doug's gonna go out there for the day, he's going to just, attach these in some way or in some way, secure them so they're not floating all around the lake. I think, unless there's a third option, Doug.
I don't know what the third option would be.
Dynamite?
I thought that was tried.
It was pressure.
It was?
Oh, the way
That's
that
what I
is.
thought. Never mind, I'm old.
Are you serious?
I'm old.
What month of the year would this be going down?
It'd be done during before the lake water starts to drop.
So,
July.
July?
Maybe
4th
something
of
like-
July.
Could be done before the end of July.
I don't know, there's very few lake owners that really even wanted the mats, but when we did it before, they didn't want to have anything to do with having mats on their property, even though it, turns to dirt or something, so.
Can we table this until closer to July, just because it's hard to rally anybody around this cause when all the floating mats are submerged? The
Sure.
moment, it's
Um,
easy to forget that they
Yes.
happen.
Watchful waiting.
forgive me I just don't know. So when you move the mats, you said you lock them in. What do you do? Do you stake them?
Yeah, stake them and then tie them to the shoreline somewhere.
Do you, so it's kind of seat of your pants.
Yeah, it's not like you're gonna just push the mat up into the shore and hope it stays there.
No, you want it.
You know, secure it, hopefully
Tethered
it's secured,
somewhere.
tethered enough so that it's not gonna move, and then when the water level drops, it'll root itself.
Doug, do you anticipate launching before June 14th?
Depending on temperature, I'm gonna say,
It's probably right around time, huh?
I'm saying that's probably right around the time we're gonna launch.
Because we have a meeting March 29, and our next meeting is not until June 14th. So table it to March, but we might not have good exposure of mats at that point, or June 14th. But that's probably right around the time where you can get out multiple days if you have a
Exactly.
schedule to be able to do that. So it might be perfect timing.
June 14th. Yeah. Okay, private property treatment coordination.
I think when we did the private property treatment applications in 2021, what we were trying to do was people who had waterfront wanted to make sure that we had the water lilies treated in front. And so people paid themselves because the LMD was running out of money. So unless we returned to a state where, you know, we don't have the money to cover the water lily treatment right in front of our properties. So basically, the work is all covered by the LMD, and now we have them, presumably we have money. So, I mean, I wasn't thinking that individual people would want to pay for what we're gonna do as a covered service, basically. But yeah, we were gonna go without,
Mhm.
and it was the glyphosate, so it was affordable, so it made a real difference. But this, I don't know of any other. Part of it is that if people want something, it's covered by the LMD or it's not. So they can't hire Doug to cover something that's not covered by the
It has to be
LMD.
covered by the permit, right?
Right. the
Whether or not
that's
there's
right,
funds for
yeah,
additional work to be done.
So what we were doing was finding covered work, filling in a gap.
At least on my side of the lake, the beavers are eating all the lily pads, eating all the cattail. They've cleared out huge swaths of shoreline on my side. And they're out there every night. There's 4 of them at
Well, you're
least.
right there.
And so I at least personally don't need any additional
Except
vegetation management. It seems to be handled by the beavers at the moment.
That's weird. On the other hand, they make their own dens, which multiply up
It's huge and it's beautiful. It's a work of art.
I'm sure it is.
the
Yeah,
den.
they're done, yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool to have a camera in there?
There's a lot going on.
So on the private property treatment coordination, I would recommend just saying that that's not an issue at this time.
Yeah, I mean, we will just leave the program when we wouldn't
Yeah.
promote it.
Right.
Yeah, if
If
somebody
somebody
wanted
came
something,
forward with something,
right.
How about
so
lake-
no action at this time.
How about lake levels? We're about full. aren't we? Almost.
Levels. Let's see what we got to show you. Yeah, it's pretty darn full.
It would be at this time,
We
really.
haven't had any, we had one major rain event in November. It was a 3.3 inch rain event.
Wow.
And then you can see it spike right there afterwards. And so this time last year, good. We're a little bit higher than we were last year, but yeah, it's still, you can see that the beaver flexible leveler level, we're not up to that. It's not engaged yet, so.
Where's 2023? We don't have that.
No, this was, see, it's data that
I
I
see.
captured probably a week or 2 ago, so it was the dates for, you know, the most recent date doesn't show up. It's just kind of a block of months.
I
So
see.
it's on the rise. We're gonna see it steadily creep up. We should be at nearing peak though.
It's got about that much to go.
So,
No, it's rainfall, right?
yeah, the little, yeah, spikes on the bottom, that's rainfall.
Oh my
And the-
gosh.
And the scale on the right-hand side is in inches, the rainfall in inches. The scale on the left-hand side is the lake level in
Wow.
feet.
That's
So-
February.
So, yeah, it's kind of a busy graph, but you can see just how well the lake responds to rain events.
Dave, I got a technical question on that gauge. Speaking of floating mats, we had a huge floating mat that came over and pressed up against that gauge. And so one question is, did it change the level that the measuring device considers, whatever the baseline level was? Did it get pushed over or bent down or anything so that now our data has been skewed, or are we still aligned with our original baseline?
Yeah, the data's fine. Actually, the T-post that I used to help anchor that is kind of saved the day for us. That floating mat rested right up against that T-post and then kind of stayed put. So it didn't affect the level or at all, or the
gauge itself.
the
Okay,
overall-
great.
Yeah, the gauge itself. And last time I was out there in November, I recalibrated it and I set it to take a data point every 12 hours instead of every 15 minutes. And so it was just too much data. So,
Wow, the thing was getting hysterical.
oh my gosh, these spreadsheets were a mile long. And so I went out there, this is the first time I've checked it since I recalibrated it, and it was, the data was gorgeous. It was perfect. And so the lake level maintained it, its accuracy and everything like that. So.
Oh, great. Okay, good.
So yeah, I was really happy with the way the data looked last time I was out there. But you're right, that did kind of make me nervous, that floating map that just came right up to it. And I thought about putting another T-post out there just to kind of help it protect it a little bit more. But it seems like no matter where we put that darn thing, it's gonna see a floating map one way or another. So I think the best way to do it is just to protect it the best we can.
Around it.
Yep. Great, thanks.
Yeah. And then, so this is temperature data. As you can see, we're kind of at the coldest point right now. Just the way this is going. We're a little bit colder than we were last year.
Oh, really?
But it'll start creeping up here shortly, and kind of curious now with the variability we had with 2021 and 2022, when that emergent stage is going to happen.
What depth is that?
This is, I'm not sure how deep that is actually.
Okay.
Surface.
It's just below, so it's probably a foot or two below.
Oh, it is. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's within that.
Yeah.
Doug, what did you say was the good temperature threshold?
63, 64.
Yes.
63, 64.
I just did that earlier, yeah. So it's kind of interesting to see. It's really only these little peaks that actually show up above that emergent stage. So it's usually from that June, July until that first week of October when things kind of cool off down below that 63, 64 degree temperature. So we have a short growing window. Any questions? We're still gonna do some data collection this summer, I anticipate, so looking good for that. So I think it's just business as usual there.
Interesting.
So then moving into the work plan, well, it's 2022 work plan. We've completed that. So we'll look at 2023 this year. So this month, we've reviewed the 22 treatment summary report, and we're updating our treatment plans for it. Following this meeting, I'll be submitting the work plan and operating budget to City Council for their review. And beginning lake treatment opportunity or outreach opportunities, which we've decided to not promote this year, see how the treatment program works. prepare and review and distribute member outreach materials. So, once we get the articles we talked about tonight, we'll put together the newsletter and we'll bring probably back to everybody for the March 29th meeting for your review. I'll work with finance, kind of figure out when they want to get the assessments out the door. So if we can get your articles by the end of the month, that would be helpful. That gives us some time to get it into our formats and get it reviewed internally, and then we can kind of figure it out from there. And then update and execute vegetation treatment contracts. So we also discussed that this evening. And Dave will be reviewing the SOP for a volunteer monitoring program before we put people in boats this year, just to make sure we're still good with what we need to do. Looking out to our next meeting, March 29th, we'll get those materials out, those outreach materials out, kind of coordinating them with the assessments. We'll determine if we need any new supplies for water quality monitoring. Train any volunteers who want to participate in that. So if you got any, folks that are interested in water quality program, it'd be a good opportunity for them to get engaged. I will, look at a revised roll of rates and charges if we need to revise anything, but we're not talking about assessment increases just yet. So there'll probably be no changes to the role that's already been approved. And communicate, so nothing there really for revising any assessment letters. Revisit that again next year. And then getting out into June, our next meeting after that's going to be June 14th. We're going to be getting the chemical treatments underway and floating mats if determined. We'll make that determination at the June 14th meeting. And we'll review the aerial assessments and any other data that Doug has to share for that June 14th. And that's really it. We get into our summer program. We can review at later dates. Any question on the work plan for the next couple of months?
No.
So did September have the walkabout on what you were showing? There it is. Thanks.
September 13th. Any other questions? We're good. 22 budget wrapped up as expected. Got final billing from Doug for contract services, $12,820. Cities collected all of its fees. You can see here with the water quality, we budgeted for 500. We spent 238 on the data that for the volunteer program. The NPDS permit fee has been paid, and miscellaneous operating costs, which I'd have to go back and look to determine what they were. But total expenditures for 22 were 16,074. And we had a updated, so we had said ending fund balance here of 35,811. That's actually been updated to 51,000, which you saw on the table here. 51,166. We identified a couple of accounting errors that improved that. Basically making sure funds were being appropriately accounted for, but weren't lost in the system. This is your budget for the coming year. This is what your budgets are going to start to look like, just because we have them in the city system, and you'll see them over a year-to-year basis. And as expenditures come in, you'll be able to see this to the city's accounting system. So this is, again, based on the budget for this year. This is what we had budgeted out there, which, if we continue to move forward with the budget as it is, we'll probably be seeking a budget amendment from City Council for a $34,000 or a $35,325 budget this year. That's the end of the packet. Any questions on the budget?
Yeah, how is compliance with the, with people paying in?
I'd have to go back and look at last year's. I think we had almost 100% last year.
Really?
Yeah, maybe
Oh,
one or two
actually.
properties. One or two properties hadn't participated, but we'll see this year, what that compliance looks like.
And when somebody doesn't pay, that's,
It doesn't go away.
yeah, that'll come out of them if they sell the property. it'll come out
Correct.
first.
Right. So after I think a couple of warnings, if there's no contact with the city, no payment plans arranged, then a lien gets filed and as soon as property sells, the LMD recovers.
So we don't have anybody who's hardcore about being hardcore about not paying it. Oh, we
Yeah,
do.
you've had a couple, but those have been resolved.
Oh, they have. Okay, so but currently we don't. We do.
There was a lot of resolution over the last 2 years for some of those outstanding accounts that had just refused to pay.
Oh,
They sold the house and we got to recover the funding, so. Any question from TV land on the budget or the work plan?
No question from Jody.
I'm okay, thanks.
hey, Tom, the condos look nice, the paint, I think. In my opinion.
Good, thanks. Yeah. Makes us a little more blended in with the background of the dark green and all that. So we don't stand out as much as my impression.
You could have used bright pink.
Who's Mark Free?
Yeah, I don't have my speaker working.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Hey,
He's my neighbor.
Oh, he's your neighbor.
Yeah.
Welcome,
Right
Mark.
next door to Walani. He's got the Bill's old place.
Oh, okay. Nice to meet you.
Hello, Margaret.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
sure.
Do we have any future agenda items that are not already?
Newsletter, progress on latex.
Champagne next time round.
Oh.
Welcome, bottle.
I already forgot what we were celebrating.
It's just the first time we've seen each other
Oh.
face to face for the last 3
Right.
years.
It's weird. isn't it?
So the newsletter by the end of the month then? Drafting.
Or by the next.
No,
oh, yeah, by the-
I will, and sure, I'll get it to you anyway, we'll work it out. It's not, it's 200 words.
Next meeting, March 29th.
I don't hold things in my elderly brain anymore.
Give an excellent memory, just very short.
And I think we've done a pretty good job of getting our processes in order over here. We have some new support in our department. So, you might have noticed that you got the packet a week early.
Yeah.
That was a milestone for Dave and I. We were pretty proud of that.
Yes.
You know,
And the broadcast thing. that
Right,
was
so
awesome.
hopefully
Thank
everything
you. Kudos.
moves well moving into the future, so.
I was just gonna say that the city is moving towards a more streamlined minutes for meeting minutes, so they might not be as detailed as they have been in the past. We're gonna try to capture the big decisions being made and whatnot. So I don't know if there's some other pertinent pieces in there. I'll try to get those in there too, but I'm gonna try to streamline this a little bit more.
And so if you have, agenda items that you'd like to talk about, that, try and let us know at least a week before, so that way we can update the agenda, get it out there. Granted, things still come up and we can adjust the agenda as needed, but, try and be thoughtful about that because we do need to get this stuff out there. And to what, Dave was just saying, this is another reason why I was asking tonight for motions and, because we need to be, really the minutes are gonna just reflect action. Right, not necessarily discussion.
Right.
We had a history with this group of having long narratives of discussion, so we can remind ourselves 2 months later what the conversation was. So some of that's gonna go away,
Proactive. really.
That's a very polite way of saying we talk a lot.
No, it's not that, it's just, we have a lot of elements of the discussion, points of discussion. That's good,
I know it wouldn't.
It's a discussion.
I meant you.
so.
Well then, with 10 minutes to spare, we're adjourned.
Good job.
Hey.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. Well, thank you, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
Dawn.
Bye.
Bye, Tom.
Hi, Mark.